Okay, this is like the first part of the video, but I'm actually recording it after everything else. I'm in the middle of editing, and I just wanted to make this little addendum to kind of put at the beginning while the warnings are on screen and everything, to say that I don't really like making videos. Unfortunately, it is just not my thing. And this topic in particular has like so many nuances and so many different facets, and it's something I think about quite often in a lot of complexity. And I've written essays and a lot of complexity about it. But for the sake of this video, things are very brief and very condensed and just not as nuanced as I would like. But unfortunately, that's just kind of how it has to be because, like, I'm not good at making videos and I don't like doing it. And I made the script and I'm on like my sixth version of the script. I've written it so many times, and it's hard. I realized that either I had to be extremely long winded or extremely condensed. I couldn't find a space in the middle. So this is what we ended up with. Just know that there's a lot more to say about this topic, and I'm condensing it for my own sake. When I was 14, I was groomed. It was on this backwater, now defunct site, which was my first exposure to social media. He was in his early 20s and a complete loser by all accounts. This isn't a personal anecdote placed at the beginning of my think piece to levy sympathy. It's something that happened, and it absolutely was wrong and dangerous, but I got out relatively unscathed. It's just something I've been thinking about more lately. Not necessarily in the context of what it did to me specifically, but rather how it worked and how I responded in turn. What systems in place had to fail or succeed for it to be allowed to happen. How it maybe in some ways has shaped how I interact with the world going forward. I was groomed when I was 14, and by 16 I had decided I was a hardened adult. By that time, I had many months to really mull it over, going through cycles of anger and indifference and cynicism. I was in a much different place online now. Journeying across different platforms, I realized there was a whole community for the little Minecraft series I had been watching for some time now, Hermitcraft. I found my way to Twitter and Tumblr, and had split my time about 70-30 between them respectively. Now I knew why what happened to me was fucked up. I had more grasp on things like that. So when I noticed a popular Hermitcraft artist, whom I had liked and respected and sometimes even defended, was just openly enjoying porn of underage characters, porn art rather, I was shaken. I was scared and angry. I think they were the characters from the then new Spider-Verse movie. Characters so close in age to me at the time. It was stomach churning and is still hard to even think about for reasons I will not detail graphically. I remember it being 3 a.m., I was tired and my neck ached, and I was wide awake, nervously consulting with a friend about it. In a move I would come to regret for years after, I did point it out publicly. While this was done in a way I wouldn't handle it today, that's not why I regret it. I don't think it was necessarily wrong. The point of the story is not some unique evil, some unbelievable scandal. I would come to understand gross, predatory people like this are a dime a dozen. The real point is the aftermath and the consequences, as viewed through the perspective of a 16-year-old. Nothing even remotely negative happened to the artist, to be clear. They continued on like usual. Over on Tumblr, they and their followers snickered over it, openly and very directly implying that this was nothing. They were doing much worse where it was properly hidden. What did happen, though, was multiple hugely popular artists swooping in to defend them by yelling at me, the kid. Now listen, I don't pull the I was a minor card that much, but despite what I thought at the time, I was indeed a kid. Kids can and do fuck up. It happens all the time. It's how we learn and how we grow. But what's always 100% inappropriate is being a full-grown adult, privately going into a kid's DMs to not only yell at them, but yell at them in defense of your friend who was jerking off to kids of their age. Even just going into a kid's DMs as an adult to yell at them, in general, is unacceptable. This was what really shook me about the whole thing. Not only was that gross behavior happening, but then I had people who I had followed and respected on some level coming directly to me. People who are still in the fandom, still very popular. A couple of them have even done official art for the Hermits, years afterwards. As I would come to learn, after more or less leaving Twitter over this, was that for this fandom, my experience was not the exception, but the rule. It was an open secret that some of the most popular artists were engaged in very dubious shit. And all of their buddies would protect them, and no one said anything. Now I know specifically there was an entire server for grooming and very weird behavior in the Hermitcraft fandom, perpetuated by people who never faced any consequences. There's only one time I can think of where someone involved in that faced any negativity. And in that case, it wasn't even about the grooming, just some other unrelated topic. They got harassed, then they wrote some Google Doc whiny bullshit, and suddenly everyone in the community was patting them on the back and wiping away the poor baby's tears. Now this person is casually coming back to the fandom. They didn't leave because of pressure, just because they got interested in other media. No one says anything, and again, popular artists who have done official work for the Hermits are happy to openly declare their ongoing friendship. This person was part of that grooming server. They were extremely shitty in so many tangibly harmful ways. There is not the slightest idea that they have changed in any way at all, because they never decided anything was wrong. Because they were never called out as being in the wrong. And so there is no expectation of improvement on their behavior. People familiar with a fandom may recognize who I'm talking about. It's something everyone kind of knows about, but no one cares enough to speak up. New people in the fandom won't have any idea, more than likely. I wish you could say it gets better from here, but it really doesn't. Years later, I was an adult myself. I think at this point I had really internalized the culture of the space, which is to keep quiet. That's not to say I never voiced my opinions. I have always been extremely opinionated, but when it came to specific events or members of the community, I bit my tongue. Which is why when I started to run into issues with a specific group and individual, for a while I said nothing and just kept blocking. But this individual kept getting banned, and so kept trying to follow me. I had to keep going onto his blog to block him. Every time I was left revolted and angry. Every time one of his posts would appear in someone else's blog, I was just as revolted. I learned he was far, far worse than who I'd usually dealt with up until now. This is Wizard. I would call him something of a figurehead for this collective. He's bad, but somehow not the worst. He has a good deal of influence, and everyone is friends with him, even the few users who seem like they might be a little more reasonable. His main claim to fame is having made so many constant threats of sexual assault towards the creator, Good Times with Scar, that Scar and a few other hermits were forced to become personally aware of him, an attempt to ban him from their spaces. Keyword, attempt. Wizard loves to both whine about this as censorship and get off to it, gloating about how Scar and his colleagues like Impulse SV have been forced to see his posts and feel that discomfort and fear and violation. Wizard also does his fair share of pedophilia posting, and of course, fetishizing how Scar's disability would make it hard for him to fight back. He also specializes in extremely photorealistic art, where he has repeatedly depicted Scar being assaulted in various ways. Obviously, I didn't want him or his ilk around. I didn't want to ever see any of that shit, and since blocking wasn't effective, nor were the multiple warnings I put on my page, I tried to make a post that would drive them off. It didn't work. Instead, it kicked off a months-long back and forth that for the life of me, I cannot escape. It's hard to really summarize. I'm trying to tell my story here and illustrate the danger I feel is lingering, and has been for many years, but to delve too deep breaks up the message I'm trying to send. In many places, it was the chosen narrative that I was a quote-unquote moral crusader, that any hate any of these people got was attributed solely to me personally, that actually I was the one doing all the harassment and not a victim at all, that I needed to learn to block and move on. And yet, through all of this, I did everything I was supposed to. I blocked and blocked, I muted and filtered and blocked some more. At times, I turned off asks and limited replies and DMs. Any sort of public post explicitly outlining what was happening was a last resort. I am easily enraged, especially when it comes to topics like pedophilia and sexual abuse, so they knew exactly how to get under my skin. And any reaction to the harassment was seen by my enemies as justification for their torture, and by my supposed allies as immature outbursts of mine. I lost either way. I was getting rape threats, death threats, suicide bait, anonymous doxing, and low-quality misgendering bait sent to a few of my friends. Whole new blogs made with the sole intent of being sock puppets to pick fights with me. There was a constant refrain of calling me crazy and delusional in such an alarmingly ableist and dehumanizing way. Even an attempt to turn pedo-jacketing on me because I drew a character with hickeys while a teenager followed me. Again, I'm really trying to keep things brief, but it was rough. I was miserable and agitated and suicidal from it. I made myself a deeply unpleasant person in a sort of purge by fire mentality. I thought that if I sucked enough and if I was obnoxious enough, I could drive them off. It never worked, and instead, it just made people who meant me no harm turn away. The final straw was when they started archiving every single post I made. Posts about my mental health, my physical health, my financial situation, my abuse, anything. Anything. Saving them and leaving notes on them that I was not able to see or stop. So, I left my account. First, I went to a new blog with the same username. I was stupid to think that would work, and that they would leave me alone. They quickly found me again and continued archiving my posts. So, I made a new account, with a completely unrelated username. I followed only a few trusted mutuals, maybe 20 people. By this time, I had completely left the fandom. I had been leaving for months, really. Hadn't watched Hermitcraft for years, even, becoming more distant and reserved. Now I didn't follow any of the fandom blogs, and I didn't post art to the tags, and I was done. Just done. Despite that, this month, they tracked me down again, stalked me, started archiving my posts once more. I left the fandom, completely. I was nowhere in their vicinity. I had no power, no connection, no influence, no voice in anything anywhere near them. And yet, now, almost 12 full months later, they were still stalking me. Initially, I just wanted a place to vent my frustration. That is still part of why I'm here, but that's not all of it. Over the course of this whole month, I've been writing and rewriting multiple different scripts. Eventually, I realized if I just wanted to make a video venting, just a video about my experiences, it would never get done. I didn't really care enough to. It sucked what happened to me, what is still happening to me, but ultimately, that's not why I'm angry in general and at people like this. I am not angry just because I got harassed. I am angry because of what it represents to me, of what it means for the community. And in my opinion, what it really shows is we have a very dangerous fringe group, and they are so used to getting their way and being allowed to make these threats and these just disgusting posts that even the slightest pushback would draw this response. That in this community, we have so normalized silence that even smallest noise will draw the full attention of an entire group for almost a year. And not just that, because we had this group where, for my lack of silence, I was punished. But we also had other people in the fandom who did not directly punish me for saying something, but did turn their back on me as immature or kicking up petty drama. And then we had another smaller but present group who treated the whole situation like entertainment. Like my misery and my harassment was just fun to watch. And all three of these should be a red flag for any community. I know there has been grooming in the Hermitcraft community. Most of it never really makes it to the surface. I know it happened, and I know it continues to. Now we have this group who celebrates threats of sexual assault to the creators, to disabled creators, who calls statutory rape funny, who whines about Magma's TOS update being censorship because it won't allow sexual art of kids anymore. We have this group which has carefully constructed an impervious echo chamber in a fandom environment where there are not only victims, but also an expectation of silence. At the end of the day, I am no one. And because I did barely anything, gave them only the lightest pushback or criticism, they have followed and harassed me for nearly a full year, until it is no longer an option for me to be online, even casually. What would they do to someone who goes any farther? Someone who perhaps has more sensitive and incriminating knowledge on them. There is a dangerous trap being laid in this fandom, but it's not being created solely by bad actors like this, because they also rely on the rest of the fandom to continue to perpetuate silence, to be too afraid to say anything, to keep the mere idea of saying anything as some tacky misstep, some social faux pas. So, why bother to talk about any of this? Typically, with this sort of thing, it's supposed to be seen as beneath you to speak about, even if you're a victim to it. Because no one should be that online, am I right? But honestly, I think we gotta strap in and talk about this shit sometimes. Because it's not going anywhere. We can't observe online communities as a vacuum anymore. Not when we've been shown time and again that it does bleed into everyday life just like any other social thing. The landscape is evolving for better or worse. And where before the internet was this novelty space, it is now effectively the largest third space in the entire world. I want to go back to the beginning of this video. When I was 14, I was groomed. I wasn't really part of any larger community with my abuser. We just happened to find each other. He validated things I had began to think about my parents, and he told me that I was smart, too smart to be held down by them, and that is why they hated me. Which, to be honest, was kind of true. But, my point is, he wasn't a particularly cunning groomer. He didn't put in much effort, and it still worked very well. I started to learn a language for him, took up a new religion for him, looked into a career I had never been interested in before just because it was his. The only reason it didn't get really bad was because I realized I was transmasc, and he really didn't like that and ghosted me. Bullet dodged. But now I think about that kid. And I think about that kid being in this community. What happens when you add social pressure and the power dynamic of popularity and the status quo of silence to a situation like that? I know I never would have said anything. And I wouldn't have been alone in that. I am not alone in that. There are kids that we have failed with the environment we have made, where it is more important to be respected and to appear unbothered and remain silent to maintain that respect than to build a safe environment that does not welcome in abusers. We have failed kids. And if nothing else, I hope this video makes some people think even a little bit. Who but abusers benefit from silence? This video was not made as a deep dive or an expose. For my own mental well-being, I cannot and will not go out and collect meticulous stacks of evidence. This is my opinions and my thoughts after years of observations, as well as my personal experiences. I don't care if or not you believe me. If you've made it this far, you most likely know me to some degree. As I have expressed before this point, I will now be mostly unreachable, unless it's something really serious. I may still post some art here if I feel like it, but I wouldn't count on it. This was supposed to be like my sign-off from my presence on the internet, but it took weeks, so at this point I've already been inactive for a while. It's not so bad. It's something that was coming even without this mess. I clung to my online space because my home life was really bad, and now that I'm free of that, I don't really need to be online like how I was before. I've been out on my own for like over a year now. I think it's like a year and a half. And I feel like slowly I've been kind of just waking myself up. And now I'm kind of fully there in some ways, where my mind is just always going, and there is this kind of anxious feeling, but it's also kind of just an untapped potential thing. There's a lot that I could do, and I'm shackled by very little at this point. I have some ambitions, I have some thoughts, I have things that I should probably do. And when I think about any of those things, none of them are being online in like any capacity. Not like I've been. It's just not advantageous or needed anymore. And so I'm just kind of gone. There's a lot to do.